Good day. Let's continue our discussion on the nature of research. And today I'd like to talk about how research is a bridge between the theoretical pole and the empirical pole. When we say that research is a bridge of the knowledge gap, that tells you that in a way it provides a mediation, a way of clarifying on the one hand our understanding of the world in terms of our ideals or what research tells us to be the ideal situation vis-a-vis the actual scenario. And that tells you that on the one hand, what research really does is to actually put together the theoretical pole of knowledge, or what we think things should be, or how we think things should be, and the empirical pole of knowledge, or what actually things are. And what the research process does is to actually pull the tension between the two. On the one hand, to bring the empirical pole closer to the theoretical pole, but also at the same time to pull the theoretical pole closer to the empirical pole. And that's something that's very important, no? So this is not simply a matter of imposing the theoretical pole on the empirical pole. No, it's not simply like that. But instead, a matter of clarifying, this is what it's stated in theory, how is it in practice? No? Or sometimes we say, this is how it's written in policy, how do we really implement policy? Or how do we really clarify policy so that we are able to, in fact, practice what we preach? But when we look at this theoretical pole and empirical pole, we need to understand that it doesn't really actually come to us that easily. So in the theoretical pole of knowledge, we need to understand that there are certain parts to certain wholes. And when I say parts to the whole, I mean it. No? On the one hand, there is the concept. This is the idea that I really want to implement to my empirical pole, such as leadership style, leadership goals, or operational design, or sometimes these are church teaching or philosophical concepts that I have to understand. So there is always a concept. Whenever we say there is a concept, we actually realize we're always already inclined to a particular way of perceiving or understanding the world. What do we basically mean by that? No, when I was younger, there was this very funny comics on why the chicken crossed the road. No, and this will provide you an understanding of our perception of concepts. How does it provide you an understanding of our concepts? Well, when you look at why did the chicken cross the road, for example, there are many justifications or reasons why the chicken did so. No? Allow me to share to you one from Reader's Digest. Here, there are 30 of the funniest why did the chicken cross the road jokes. No? So why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side faster. No? In a way, the response to the question will provide you a particular vantage point. But the particular vantage point is also the theory that's being used to explain justify why the chicken crossed the road. Let's look at some more examples. Why did Chicken Little cross the road? To warn the people on the other side that the sky was falling. Or why didn't the chicken cross the road? Because there was a KFC on the other side. Or why did the chicken run across the road? To get to the other side faster. Or why did the chicken cross the road? To buck traffic. Why did the chicken cross the playground? To get to the other slide. Or why did the chicken cross the road? I don't know why. I don't know. I asked you. So there are many justifications, like why did the dinosaur cross the road? Because chickens didn't exist yet, or things like that. No, so there are many. The point that the point of the of that joke, for example, why the chicken crossed the road, is to simply demonstrate to us that there is a singular phenomena, and that in approaching this singular phenomena, there are in fact varied answers, varied justifications to a single phenomena. Now, the justifications, the variations that we take, actually constitute what we have been calling a while ago as concepts. So concepts play a very important role in the research process. And concepts do not come from the empirical pole. If anything, they come from the theoretical pole. Allow me to share to you another concept. And this time, allow me to simply just demonstrate how, for example, I'll search a particular concept. Let's look at, for example, I wanted to work on leadership styles. No, I'm just referring to leadership styles just for purposes of having a framework. No, for example, I wanted to look at leadership styles, and then I realized there are many leadership styles, and there are many frameworks that I can implement. And simply looking at these, for example, the results of a Google search will demonstrate that there are 5, 8, and in fact, there are many leadership styles. Even it can goes to 10, and you'd see that each of these one vary from each other depending on what theoretical source or basis they're actually getting it from. So again, as I explained, why the chicken cross the road? Maybe because KFC is on the other side or isn't on the other side. And that will tell you that's a particular or a singular concept to explain the phenomena of why the chicken crossed the road. Now, when you look at, for example, leadership styles, and I simply want to survey different leadership styles, I can basically look at, for example, Lewin's leadership style. And when I look at Lewin or Kurt Lewin's leadership style, there are only 3 to look at. Authoritarian, which basically says which provides clear expectations. That's the characteristic. Delegative, offer little or no guidance. Participative, participate in the group, offer guidance. Remember, a while ago, I was showing to you a slide, and the slide basically demonstrated 3 very important aspects. On the one hand, there's a concept. The concept is subdivided into parts because you cannot simply swallow the whole. So it has to be divided into constitutive parts. Others call it parts, others call it dimensions, types, typologies. There are so many other names that are being used or employed, but they basically are the same. These types, these typologies, these dimensions, these characteristics, these parts actually constitute the whole concept. No? So in this sense, there are constructs. These are the parts of the concept. And the propositions are the concrete expression or manifestation of the construct. Now, when you look at, for example, when we were looking at that about leadership styles, in these single figure alone, now you'd see already the manifestation of the 3. The concept, for example, is Lewin's leadership style. Now, Lewin's leadership style has 3 constructs. And what are the constructs? Authoritarian, participative, and delegative. Now, if there are 3 constructs, what are the propositions or indicators? No, that's another term you have to take note of. Indicators of these constructs, and also the diagram provides it. For authoritarian, the characteristic of the authoritarian is that it provides clear expectations. For delegative, offer little or no guidance. Participative, participate in the group, offer, and the one that offers guidance. When you look at these propositions or indicators, now there has to be more for sure, to explain what a utilitarian type of leadership is. But at least this is a very concrete expression of the dimension or construct, which is authoritarian. And when you put together the 3, it will constitute the leadership style. Now, it's very important. So when you look at the literature, you have to take note. If Lewin's leadership style is the concept, if this is the concept must be divided into parts. And in this case, there are three, no? The autocratic, the democratic, and the laissez-faire. Now, what do you have to pay attention to? You don't only have to pay attention to the general definition of leadership style per se. You need to take note also how the different dimensions are defined. Because if the propositions or indicators are to be drawn from the definition of authoritarian, are to be articulated, they have to be drawn from the definition of authoritarian leadership, or they have to be drawn from the definition of participative leadership, or they have to be drawn from the definition of the delegative leadership. So what I have demonstrated to you is basically the understanding that on the one hand, no, a particular concept that you wanted to work on, whether that is on operations management, whether that is on church teaching, dogma, philosophical concepts. These concepts, from the Latin word conceptus, no, to give birth, is something that you construct, no, create, if you will, and that you create it in a way based on the different constructs that you want to put in the concept and the indicators or propositions. Now, why is it important to take note of these three movements? While the review of related literature should contain all the three, the concepts, the constructs, and the propositions, you need to understand that in the advent that you will develop an instrument to gather data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, you will have to draw it from the indicators that you have identified in the review of related literature. So that without having a clear understanding of what the concept is, without having a grasp of what the concept is, you cannot actually identify the dimensions, nor can you identify the propositions or indicators eventually. That being said then, no, if you wanted to work on a particular concept, the very first thing I really compel, even command you to do, is to actually read your literature. And you need to understand that what literature review will provide you is a plurality of perspectives. And when I say plurality of perspective, I mean it. There cannot be a singular perspective when in fact there can be many. Allow me to share again another concept of leadership style. For example, I wanted to work on what is called visionary leadership as a new concept about leadership styles. But under that, I will have to use Goldman. But under that, I will have to operate on the dimensions. If Lewin's concept or theory only identified 3, Goldman identified 6 leadership styles, and that complicates it a little bit more, right? The coaching, affiliative, democratic, commanding, pace setting, and vocabulary. If these are the dimensions of Goldman's understanding of visionary leadership, I have to take note of the definition of each of these concepts. And as I told you, the definition of the concept will have to be, on the one hand, on the conceptual level, but after I have seen the definition on the conceptual level, I need to be able to articulate that definition in the way that I will use it in my study. And for that matter, I will have not only to have conceptualized the concept or the idea or the dimensions, but also to operationalize, and that's what it means, operationalize, as it is used in the study, to operationalize a particular understanding. So the definitions are important. But wait, when you look at this one, no, based on a particular set of criteria, there are very specific propositions or indicators from the definition that demonstrates concretely what a commanding type of leadership is. These aspects under the 6 leadership styles of Goldman will eventually constitute what we now know as the indicators or propositions of the concept. So there, I have demonstrated to you already that a particular literature, whether you like it or not, or particular concept that you want to study, will always have constructs, will always have propositions. Sometimes it's simply a matter of articulating the constructs and articulating the propositions. So that if I have my concept's definition, for example, should already constitute the constructs, right? But my constructs definition should already constitute the propositions or the indicators that I will use in the study. So please take note of those three movements. It's an inverted pyramid movement, and it's going to be very specific depending on the type of study you're working on. Concepts, constructs, and propositions. In the armed forces, for example, for capability development, any concept like detailed service can be approached using the capability framework in the military. And the capability framework will always follow the constructs or the dimensions of the .MPLF, or doctrine, organization, and things like that. But when you look at .MPLF, you'd see more specifically how it can be concretized to very specific and concrete standards based on literature about a particular capability that soldiers are actually checking or verifying. It's very important to consider that perspective because it would shed light on how the study is going to be pushed forward. Let's go to the other side. No? If the theoretical pole is always already composed of concepts, constructs, and propositions, the empirical pole, on the other hand, can in fact be subdivided into 1, physical reality, 2, psychological reality, and 3, social reality. Now, when we look at the empirical pole, sometimes we only look at material, the structures, the standards for a particular object and things like that. Areas, spaces where religious devotion is performed. The psychological, which basically operates on attitudes, which are measurable. You've figured that out. The IQ tests are measurable and others like that. Or the social, where we basically look at how they relate or deal with other people. Now, in a way, our interpretation of reality in terms of physical, psychological, and social will depend largely on the lenses that we use to interpret physical, psychological, or social aspects. In that sense, then, even if the theoretical pole is actually what we first designed, we actually look for the indicators of the theoretical pole in the empirical pole, and that's something that you have to pay attention to. What actually bridges the two, the theoretical pole and reality for that matter, is in fact our research process. When we say research process, that actually implies what the research design is going to be, and in a moment I'll give in the next few days, in fact, I will try to lay down to you different research designs in order for you to get a feel of what is the most appropriate research design. Not all research designs are the same. Some will be most appropriate. The sampling plan, and when we say sampling plan, there are only 2 types of sampling. One is a probability sampling, which is a sampling that is representative of the entire universe or population, and or non-probability sampling, which does not really intend to generalize, but to actually get the nuances or the differences in a particular population. So there are 2 sampling methods, one that provides you with a general picture, a picture that you can universalize, if you will. And on the other hand, one that you can, that is so particular, so specific, so deep, that you can actually not generalize it. And it will also consider whether the type of measurement that will be employed, just in case you're going to use measurement, and the type of measurements you'd see will constitute nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio, and the presumption that everything is either parametric, following the normal curve, or non-parametric, which is not following the normal curve, which is, or the bell curve, which is either skewed to the left or skewed to the right. And then how we're going to analyze the data. But measurement also, we should not forget, constitute how we're going to collate, thematize, and even organize data, especially when we're using qualitative research. And then data analysis will employ, therefore, our way of synthesizing, putting together, clarifying ideas, and how we arrive at specific answers or questions. Whenever we have already the theoretical pole and the research process, what we actually have there is what we call a research hypothesis. The research hypothesis is, if anything, and take note of this one, the library research answer to your statement of the problems. Now, when we say library research answer to your statement of the problems, I'm basically saying that when you do your RRL, you already get more or less an idea how your answer will look like. And most probably, because this is the responses from the different literatures that you have surveyed, it will provide a more suitable target. More or less, that's the target that you're aiming at. But when you implement the research process to reality, that's really your operational hypothesis. Now, take note that when we are looking at your when you are looking at your conceptualization, constructs, and propositions, I was telling you it will follow an inverted pyramid method. And when it says it follows an inverted pyramid method, that means it's divided into, on the one hand, my conceptualization of the concept and its parts dimensions, which means that I have to be able to survey literature from the global to the local on how I would like this concept to be reinterpreted in my study, but it will have to end with my operationalization of my concept, or my operationalization of the dimensions that I've mentioned. That being the case, then, operationalization or an operational hypothesis is really my attempt to draw this concept, which might be Western, into a Philippine articulation. And therefore, my operational hypothesis, whether I like it or not, will actually sound more close to the expected answers I will have. But again, please take note that we're still operating on a hypothetical level. And as such, these are never final, but instead are only intelligent or brilliant guesses of the answers that we are expecting from the questions that we raised. Now, the operational hypothesis will allow me to draw a step closer to the problems, or to the questions, or to the reality empirical pole that I wanted to study. For example, if I'm a theologian, my research hypothesis will provide me literatures that came from the West and things like that. My operational hypothesis would be studies on local church teachings. If I am, for example, a military soldier, the research hypothesis will provide me different literature from the different armed forces. But then the operational hypothesis would actually be my consideration, or my treatment, or even my articulation of how the armed forces, or even how the local church, if I'm doing theology, basically reinterprets, draws closer, or pulls to themselves the concept that I want to study. Now, when I'm already able to identify my operational hypothesis, then I realize that the data will be collected from reality, and that it will be mediated by the research process. I will gather the data. No, that's the reason why I always tell students, if as early as the research hypothesis, your library work, you already have answers to your research problem, that means that's not a research problem. What policies? It's done. No, you only need to do RRL. So that means those are not research problems. Those are literature problems. Those are theoretical. Those are attempts to theorize, but they are not, whether you like it or not, research problems, as in research problems. It's gonna be more than that. And whether you like it or not, you need to be able to think bigger if you are to make sense of the uh we then you'd realize why it's very important to make sure that your problem is not simply a literature problem or simply a conceptualization problem, because that's not the type of research that we actually encourage. And therefore, when you implement that to the empirical poll, you're now able to gather data, and that this data is about really your population sample or even the locale of your study, and then when it's true that you gather data from the empirical poll, you need to understand that analysis of data, of this data, will always come from the theoretical poll, and therefore of the constant need to revert back to literature to see instances of agreement, instances of disagreement, and even to check nuances. Which means then that if I am really to be a very good researcher, I cannot not engage my existing literature, because whether I like it or not, that the literature that I am working on is something I do not only mention at the beginning of the study, it's something that I go back to even when I already interpret data, and therefore, without the theoretical base, it's a waste of time. If you have not read, there's no research. That's what I'm saying. So if the theoretical poll is useless, you can't even go down to the empirical poll. But not only can't you not go down from the theoretical poll, you cannot even cross from the empirical poll back again to the theoretical poll. So and research, as you've seen, very clearly, is actually theory driven, and that's really what we wanted to show, that is a theory driven inquiry. Most of the problems in church or in the church, or even in most of the problem even in the military service, are actually based on answers that are not scientifically based, or are not scientifically grounded, empirically based or grounded. And for that matter, we're not actually providing solutions that are specific or concrete, or that solutions that actually address the problem. If anything, we're simply providing a strong antibiotics. And the problem with strong antibiotics, as you know, is that it destroys everything. And that's when it becomes tragic, and that's when it becomes problematic. Research is a bridge in the knowledge gap between the theoretical pole and the empirical pole, but also research is theory driven, which basically tells us then, without theory, there's no research. Without the theoretical base, which means sufficient literature, if I'm not able to review enough literature, then there's no theoretical base. And therefore, you'd understand why the next thing we're going to do is to look at the literature that supports basically the topics that you want to study, because that will clarify a lot where and what you want to do. Thank you very much.